Good afternoon. I'd like to open the Union County Board of Commissioners special meeting on Monday, January 11th, 2021 at 2 o'clock for the purpose of receiving and deliberating or taking action on information about the Union County Public Works Capital Improvement Plan. And we'll begin by turning it over to Mark Watson, our manager.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for taking time to meet with us this afternoon to discuss Public Works capital update. This is the first of 3 meetings we will have related to Union County Public Works capital projects, the funding of those projects, and the future capital improvement plan. The next meeting will be in February. We'll primarily focus on finance, and then there will be a meeting at the 1st of April where we will be looking at future capital improvement plan. But as far as today's meeting goes, I'd like to recognize Assistant County Manager Brian Matthews, who will go over the purpose of today's meeting, the outline, and then we have Hung Yi, who is our Public Works Director with us today, will walk you through a number of current projects and the state of affairs with, I'll call it the state of affairs with Public Works and Public Works programs. I would note, as Brian comes to the podium, that we have microphones placed out in the audience area to facilitate any comments or responses from staff so that we make sure we have all of that recorded today. So I assume that all of those microphones are currently turned off. You may just want to be aware of the status of that during the meeting. Brian?
Thank you, Manager. Thank you very much. Chairman and members of the board, thank you for taking time out of your afternoon to come and talk to us today. As Mark said, this is one of 3 meetings that we're going to have to talk to you about Public Works, the financing strategy for capital projects, and ultimately some decisions that the board is going to need to make as far as direction and how that plays into our financial strategy. Today is really to kind of tell you sort of where we are right now with capital projects for both water and wastewater. Water, we're in a really good place for, a lot of good things going on there. Wastewater, we have some challenges, and Hung Yi, our Public Works Administrator, is going to go through a lot of the projects here, talk to you about some of the challenges we're facing. We do have some staff members that are available if we need some more in-depth questions. So this is a time for you to receive information, ask us questions. Obviously, if you've got some future questions, don't hesitate to get up with us on that. The goal is to try and get you prepared for a decision in April, and there are some pretty hefty decisions we're going to need from you. I do want to make one little comment about there are sandwiches that are ordered, so if the board wants to take a break, there's not a break shown on the meeting, but if you decide that you want to take some time, please just let us know. We can hit a stopping point and take a little break, and then we can come back out here, or whatever the board's pleasure is. Myself and Hyung and any of the staff are always here for questions. I'm going to turn it over to Hyung right now and let him go over the presentation. And again, please don't hesitate to stop us at any point if you have specific questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Commissioners, County Manager. Always appreciate the opportunity to talk to you about all the good work that we're doing in Public Works. I want to take a second to sort of unminimize the bar screen so you can see that there are other members of Public Works on the call. They're just, I guess, virtual at this point. So I've asked them if I get in trouble or they see me steering myself off a cliff, that they need to stop me. So they should feel free to interject at any time. to do that, but for the purposes of being able to sort of see the presentation, I've just minimized it, so I've asked them to speak up if they need to. And basically, everyone there is part of the leadership of Public Works. So with that, I'm going to just take you through a short 50-slide presentation on the state of affairs, as the manager put it, at Public Works, as soon as I can get a key to work. Or I guess I'll just scroll. So to quickly just sort of summarize what the manager said, this really is an update in 3 parts. And so today, we're really looking at sort of, you know, what is the state of affairs? What is the demand for service, whether it's water or wastewater? And then what is our plan as a utility, as an enterprise, to meet that demand? And so we talk about sort of what's in the CIP for water, the CIP for wastewater, and then this last group, which we call renewal and replacement. Basically, how do we maintain what we already have? And then, you know, the meeting in February, we'll really talk about how we pay for everything. The finances, the rate study, all the things that we need to look at in terms of being able to run a self-sustaining enterprise. And then lastly, in April, as the manager said, we'll be asking you to make some decisions on where you want us to go as a water utility. So I want to start by just sort of showing you some data about the county. So going back to 2000 and looking at data we have from 2000 to today, the last 20 years, you can see that the county population has almost doubled from 123,000 to 239,000. And so those are the dots that you see at the top. Now, we were missing some data, so we weren't able to draw a complete line. But you can, again, you can sort of see the upward trend. At the same time, what we've done is we've taken our customer data, our account data, and sort of converted it into people equivalents. And so you're seeing, you know, our customer base back in 2000 was, you know, less than 42,000 people. Since that time, in 2020, we think we have about 144,000 people that we serve. On the sewer side, we have folks that have water but not sewer, so we have less sewer customers. We have about 105,000, 106,000 sewer customers. So, you know, what's the takeaway here? So we represent probably about a little bit more than half of county residents are on county water. A little bit less than half are on county sewer. So, you know, we serve a significant portion of the population in Union County. So, to sort of, with that as the very broadest of brush strokes, I'm going to take you into the Water Capital Improvement Program and sort of talk you through where we are. And I know that it's sort of transparent and grayed out, but what you're seeing behind the words are pictures of our water system, from the reservoir down at Catawba to the trucks, the utility workers that work on our system. And so as a reference point, I'm going to take you back to November 2019. That was when we had that 2-day retreat down at the Human Services Center. And we showed you this, just sort of where we are back in 2019 as a water utility, where we think water is, how much the demand is. And so we showed it by a water source, Anson County, 762 pressure zone, and the 853 East pressure zone. And then everything that's Catawba-based. And because this was done sort of on a historical basis, we can also show you some details about how many meters, pipes, everything else. But the takeaway is the bottom right corner, where we think if we did nothing that we would have a more demand for water than we had available supply, which is not good for a water utility. Our strategy at that time, and one which you all blessed, and which we are currently in the process of executing, is the following. We take water from Lake Tillery and Norwood with our partnership on the Yadkin River, and we flow water through the new Yadkin water plant that we're building out on New Salem Road, and we flow it through the Yadkin part of the county. At the same time, we still have our existing facility out on the Catawba River in Lancaster County, South Carolina, and that water flows through the Yadkin Basin. But importantly, it also flows into Catawba because we don't have enough water well, we have more water in Catawba Basin, and until we can figure out the sewer system, we have to manage it through the interbasin transfer agreement that we have. And so this is where we transfer Catawba water into the Yadkin Basin and through the sewer system return it. And so you're seeing a lot of it happen here. And you can also see that we flow some water on the south side as well. So this is our strategy: 2 water plants, 2 rivers, and we feed the entire county through those 2 systems. And I just want to point out that you can see here on the, I'll call it the headed south from the water plant, that line that you all asked us to accelerate in terms of the water system. And so we've included that as part of our strategy here. So just to say in words what I put on the slide, our strategy is to build the Yadkin Regional Water Treatment Plant, which we are currently doing, continue to invest in the Yadkin River and the Yadkin River water sources as we need to for future expansions, and manage that boundary zone between the Yadkin and the Catawba basins as we need to make sure that we have sufficient water supply in both basins. We have water contracts with other utilities, other governments, and we have interconnects with those as well, and we're going to use those primarily for emergencies, and we will continue to extend water transmission mains throughout the county, and that shows up in our CIP. And our goal is to do exactly what it says at the bottom. Continue to provide water to residents in a sustainable fashion, and both for the utility as an enterprise, but also for the residents, and so that we can continue to make water as affordable as possible. So, post Yadkin, this is what we think the water system will look like. I'll call it Anson, Yadkin over here, and then Yadkin, Catawba, where we sort of blend the 2, and then the Catawba Basin as well. So you can see sort of as we think about the future, what we're thinking is that we're going to need about 17 MGD of water on any given day, and we think we'll have the capacity to deliver that. On a max day, we're looking at 30 MGD. So imagine the hottest day of the year where everyone is pulling water for whatever reason, and we think we will still have the capacity once we build the Yadkin plant out to be able to meet those demands. The one thing I'll tell you is, these projections about average day demand and max day demand, these are pulled from the last master plan that we did, in 2016. We are sort of at the end of that useful life of that data, because it's old and we need to update it. And so one of the things that we'll talk to you about is the current master planning process that we are going through. And so we're working to update this data so that we have fresh data, current, that we're working on. And I'll talk to you about that in a little bit. So the capital projects that support our water strategy, and I look at this in 3 buckets, and I think these are the 3 buckets that Barry Gullett talked to you about as a board. Source, you need a source of water, you need a way to transmit the water, and then you need a way to ultimately get the water to the customer. Source, transmission, and distribution. On the source side, it's the Yadkin Regional Water Treatment Plant. We've spent a lot of time over the last 1.5 years talking about it. We continue to do expansions on the Catawba River as we need to, and so those are our source projects. On the transmission side, we have the 853 West Main transmission main that we're building out. There's a water main on 762, the one headed south from the water plant. And lastly, if you recall, last year you voted on and approved $5 million a year for water transmission main extensions, and that's what this third one is, water main extension program. And so that's something that we are planning to, it's built into the plan, something we are planning to do. And lastly, in terms of distribution, beyond just the regular connections and making lines available, we do have $5 million a year for the short-line short-line program, which you are all very familiar with, because again, we spent a lot of time talking about it, and so we continue to implement that program. So, in short, that is the high-level summary of sort of what's going on the water side of the CIP. I guess I'll pause if there are any questions on the water side, or I'm happy to continue on the wastewater if there are no questions at this time.
I think the only statement I'd like to see you make is that, because this is public viewing, is that, July 1st, we'll start taking applications for the next short line?
Yes, sir. July 1st, the application period will open for the next short line program window sign-up. So they'll be able to do that.
That program's continuing?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
And the main line extension hung, the 5 million for that, that's to go to areas that we think will have a high probability of people wanting to tap on that would not be developer funded, right?
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
So if there are no other questions, I'll just move on to wastewater. And again, you know, we spent some time putting some wastewater photos behind the words so you can get a feel for sort of what's out there, from the treatment plants to the pipes to the crews that work on cleaning out our wastewater sewer lines. So what I want to start with, just sort of to ground everybody, sort of what exactly do we have? And I want to start by showing you the sewer basins and what I would say is the defined service area that the Board of County Commissioners has set as where Public Works will provide sewer service. And that's the colored area. You know, there's a big chunk in the north and a big chunk in the south, the bottom third and the, I guess I'll call it the top quarter, where we provide no service at this time. And there is a section in the middle, which is the city of Monroe, and they have their own water and sewer utility, so we do not provide service there. But the colored regions are the defined service areas, and they are the defined sewer basins that Union County Public Works operates in. What you're seeing here are by different colors, the sewer basins, and then the green lines are the existing gravity lines. You'll see 5 TPs, well, 6 actually, but 5 12-mile that we operate. It's our largest, Crooked Creek, which is our second conventional treatment plant. In the north, you'll see 3 TPs that are our 3 small package plants. The difference between a package plant and a conventional treatment facility is the difference between millions of gallons per day of treatment versus thousands of gallons a day of treatment. And then on the east side, this is Monroe's treatment plant with which we have a contract. And so they provide sewer capacity for us. So we send flow to Monroe and they treat. We obviously pay for that, but that's how we provide sewer service in the east. All the PSs are simply pump stations. They're basically used to move sewer water into the areas that we need it to go so that it can flow by gravity to one of our treatment facilities. The other thing to point out is, you know, we really get flow into our wastewater treatment plants 2 ways. One is obviously by, you know, people flushing the toilets or running the water and water entering our wastewater system. The second, and this is worth pointing out this year, is rainwater. You know, we have infiltration into our sewer system simply because, you know, it's a lot of pipe and cracks can happen and water can flow into our sewer system. 2020, as you can see by the chart, is this black line that's running up here. Going back to 2006, there's no year that's, I would say, even close to 2020 in terms of rainfall. It was a very wet year. A very wet year means lots of flow into our wastewater treatment plants. And I just want you to keep that in the back of your head as we start talking about some of these numbers that I'm going to show you. As context, you know, our average rainfall is about 45 inches a year. We were close to 60. The other thing that I will tell you is that rainfall does not fall evenly across the county. So it's not like if we get an inch of rain, the entire county got an inch of rain. Some parts get more, some parts get less. You know, we have isolated thunderstorms sometimes, so you can get a lot of rainfall in a 12-mile basin, but you might get nothing in Crooked Creek simply because it's a smaller basin. So these are averages, but it's worth keeping in mind that it was a very wet year, and it has an impact on our wastewater system. And I'll give you an example of what that means. This is the 12-mile creek treatment plant. And I'm going to show you a couple of things here because I am using this slide to set up the next several slides. So what you're seeing at this line, this red solid line at the top, is the current treatment capacity of the wastewater treatment plant at 12 Mile. It used to be 6. We did a recent expansion which added 1.5 MGD of capacity, and so that's why you're seeing it jump up to 7.5, and right now that's where it sits. The treatment capacity at 12 Mile is 7.5 million gallons per day. The green line, the green solid line, is the actual flows, average daily flow into 12 Mile. So you can see it is less than the rated capacity of 7.5 MGD. If we did a straight line projection, if we projected how much flow there would be going into 12 Mile over time, if we used the 2019 data, we'd be fine. This chart would suggest that we are fine at the current rate of growth in the treatment plant. The two dotted lines in between are at 80% and 90%. And it's what we call the 80-90 rule, and that actually is important in terms of how we plan for the future. It's a state requirement, and again, I'm setting this up for the future, so I'll leave that right there. If I show this to you, if we actually built the future projection based on 2020 and all the rain that we've got in 2020, you can see the difference. We're in this, no longer are we okay. We're actually hitting the 80% rule in about 4 years, and the 90% in about 8 years. So again, it matters. This rainfall matters in terms of its impact on our flows into the wastewater treatment plant and how we do projections for the future. And I guess I'm trying to set up here the danger of using 1 year's worth of rain, even if it was the heaviest in recent memory, to really do a projection for the future. So, we try to take averages and use rolling averages to try to account for it without letting it completely drive us crazy into a state of panic, like this would suggest that we should be. The 80-90 rule, so I'm going to get back to that. So what this says is...
Can I ask a quick question?
Yes, sir.
The system development fees that we have, do they cover the cost of those increased? Will the system development fees alone cover the cost of increasing the capacity?
No.
At the maximum, which I believe is around 11,000, would that cover the?
I don't believe, sir, that it would.
So the system development fees, and Brian is shaking his head no.
Yes, sir, it will not cover the cost of those future improvements.
Do we have a number that, like, for the future improvement, just, for example, the 12-mile capacity projections, for them to cover the cost, what would they have to be?
Excuse me. I don't think we have a number for that. Understand that there is a defined methodology that you have to use for developing what your system development fees are.
Mhm.
And so it's not a matter of getting future development to pay for all of those improvements, because those improvements are spread out among all customers, not just new customers.
Mhm.
So unfortunately, I don't have enough information to be able to answer your exact question as to what the amount is, but whatever we do, we're never going to be able to charge enough money from new development to pay for all of the expansion.
And I understand that there's repairs and things like that have to go into it too, but I think there should be some kind of, for example, $100 a square foot for a house or $200 a square foot house. I think I saw a number just scanning through here, the cost per gallon, maybe on the package plants or something. So I guess if you wouldn't mind, maybe find that number out for me or close to it, because I'd be very curious as to how much how much the fee would have to be in order so that the residents that live here now, not covering their costs, but the cost of increasing the capacity for new development, what that would be. You understand the question?
We will do our best to get you a reflective number that is,
Okay.
shows you what that cost would be.
Okay, thank you.
So 80-90 rule, basically it says two things. Once your wastewater treatment plant or the system, and for our case, the system is the plant and the basin that it's in, hits 80% of permitted capacity, it essentially says you have to be in the process of planning and designing the solution for the future, because you're getting close to maxing out your capacity. It also says, once you get to 90%, prior to getting to 90%, all the permits, all the construction documents, everything that you need to address the future has to be in place. So 80 says you basically, I sort of shorthanded to 80% of capacity means you have to start thinking about it, and by 90%, you better start doing it to fix whatever capacity issues that you have. Yes, sir.
For public, will you explain what permitted capacity is, what the difference between, just development and permitted capacity?
Okay, so, and we cannot just simply discharge all of our treated wastewater into a stream or a river. So we work with the state as part of that process to determine how much a certain stream can handle in terms of a load of our discharge on a daily basis. And we get a permit from the state that says, at this location, you can discharge 7.5 million gallons. That's your permit. You are permitted to discharge 7.5 million gallons of water per day, treated water, let's say.
I guess the point I was.
Well, I'm headed there.
Okay.
So that's what we work towards. And that capacity then for, that 7.5 permit translates into treatment capacity for us. And so we then have to collect and transmit and then treat the wastewater from our customers. And so and I think where you're headed is as a new developer or a new facility, structure, building, shopping center comes online, there's a calculation that's done for all of that in terms of what we think their flow is going to be, or in terms of how much wastewater is that particular shopping center, facility, whatever, residence, townhome development, apartment, whatever, how much that's going to create. And so they are then permitted by us working with the state to say you can discharge a certain amount of wastewater into our system and we will treat it for you. I don't know if that answered your question.
Kind of, the point I was trying to make is that, when a individual or a development comes in, they pay their permit fees, and then that's when you book it, right?
So I think maybe the easiest way to answer that, and Young started with it, is when a developer decides that they want to potentially develop a piece of property, there are various steps they have to go through before they can actually start construction. And the only way you can start construction on a development is you actually have to have a permit for water and sewer that comes from the state. It actually doesn't come from us, it comes from the state. Sorry, it's not working. Sorry about that. Anyway, so that particular permit is what allows them to then discharge into our system. There are a number of projects that are going through the review phase that are not permitted. Just because you receive a rezoning doesn't mean you're permitted. It just means that you are speculating on a development and you've not gotten approval for the discharge of sewer into our system. So when Young says that a project is permitted, that means the state has actually issued a permit for that development that they can discharge into our system. So there are a lot of projects out there that are going through engineering review, they don't have a permit. They're going through rezoning process, they don't have a permit. And they won't get a permit until we look at their plans, approve their plans, and then submit them to the state for final approval. Does that answer your question?
Yes, sir.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes, sir.
Young, tell me, with regard to 12 Mile, are we permitted to 9?
We're permitted to 15.
to 15?
We've been sort of working our way, and we have long-term plans to expand further, but they're way out. And in fact, I will get to some of that in the subsequent slides.
My question comes from that last statement, says, prior to exceeding 90%, all permits shall be obtained. So we are already past the permitting part to 15 million
Well,
gallons at 12
So
months.
as my folks are telling me, we're permitted to 12, not 15. So, you know, in real time, I'm getting corrected, so that's how it's supposed to
I
work.
guess my question is, you say we're permitted to 12, are there additional permits that we have to do once
Once we get to 12?
once we get to that 90%? Or we already have those in place?
Well, I think all permits shall be obtained are basically construction permits, soil and erosion control, all those kinds of permits necessary for construction.
Okay.
Not necessarily, discharge permit from the
Okay.
state.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Rushing.
Thank you. And I think the original design for that plant was 15 million gallons. We maybe only permitted to 12. The original design was 15 million. But what you're saying is like, when we get to that 80% of what we are today, we have to be planning on what we're going to build
Yes, sir.
for, not that we got to go to 12, but the next expansion. So in phases, it's going, it was like 3 million, 6 million, and it just keeps going up.
Yeah,
So
so,
the next phase.
Yes, sir. And so when we got the original permit, it was for 12, up to 12 MGD. We designed it and built it, and the site is actually designed up to 15 MGD, to be able to handle up to 15 MGD, but we're not permitted for that. We're only permitted to 12. So let me take you through some data to sort of put some numbers around some of these generalities. So again, November 2019, this is what we shared with you at the retreat at the Human Services Center. These numbers were, well, they are what they are. So you're seeing the 5 treatment plants, the permitted capacity, the actual average daily flow, and then percent of flow used. And this is what the state will look at for the 80-90 rule. They don't look at permitted, they look at actual flows. And so at the time, when I showed this to you, we were in trouble at Grassy Branch because we were at 118% of capacity. And we were close in Tallwood at 86, but Old Sycamore, Tallwood, and Grassy Branch are package plants. So you can't treat them all the same. You got to look at each of them differently, and so we have a solution for those, and we'll talk about it. But this is the exact same slide that I showed you in November. Related to that, this is also the other slide I showed you from November. It shows you that same information about actual average daily flow. By the way, if you're looking at the PowerPoint that we sent you on Thursday, or Brian sent you on Thursday, it doesn't include this, because we've been working on this Friday, Saturday, Sunday, even this morning, trying to include some of this information as we thought of other good ideas to share with you. So this is I guess I'll call it the updated version of it. And so it's part of the handout that was put in front of you this afternoon. The column that we included on this slide is permitted obligated flows. Basically, new development, which is a part of Public Works, basically has given permission for a developer to connect to the system, but it has not yet connected. So when you add up the two, and you can see the numbers, percent of permitted flow used. And so while the state manages to this, just the actual average daily flow, just from a long-term management of the system, we're looking at these two columns together just to see where we are. If, to do that hypothetical, if everyone that is permitted to connect did connect, what would that mean in terms of the system capacity? So these are 2019 numbers, and what I'm going to show you is now, I'll say January 2021 numbers, and I call it January 2021 simply because, well, it's January 11th, 2021. That's what I'm showing you. The data that I'm showing you is actually from November of 2020, which is a year later in terms of 12 months from the retreat. So I am showing you the permitted capacity again. It's the same, hasn't changed. This is the current actual average daily flow. And if you're flipping, trying to compare 2019 to 2020, I'm going to save you the trouble. Don't bother. I have a slide. I've done it for you. So just give me 2 slides, and I will show you what those comparisons look like.
Can I make a comment?
Yeah.
Something that's really interesting is Grassy Branch.
Yes, sir.
How it went down, and the reason is because there's 3 schools
Right.
that have not been attending school.
That is correct.
And so that gives us some opportunities, I think, maybe to look at just the massive impact that those 3 schools would have on that project and what we can do alternatively to fix some issues there.
Well, I think you're right. If the schools were open, we would be in, these numbers would be much higher, and the problem would have an even greater urgency than it does today, and I'm telling you, it's urgent that we deal with it. But that is a fair point that you make, Commissioner Rushing, and that's one I was going to make a couple of slides later. The new thing on this slide is, we also have 2 contracts for sewer. One is on the east side, that's the city of Monroe. We're contracted for 2.65 million gallons a day. We send about 1.5 million, a little bit more, and that is about 59% of the capacity, of the contract capacity. The reason 6 Mile is the basin sort of farthest west. We send that to Charlotte Water. They treat it for us at McAlpine. We have a contract for 3 MGD. We send a little bit over 2. It's about 68%. The reason why I don't show it, because they're contracts, so we don't manage the plant, so we're not responsible for the average actual daily flow calculations. So each contract has its own set of unique terms that we are responsible for, and we can go into it if you want to, but I will tell you that if I can save you the trouble, it's not something you want to go into. We're managing it, and the contracts are in pretty good shape at this point. So, as I promised, well, yes, sir.
I want to add something for the benefit of the other commissioners. Commissioner Helms and I, along with you and other staff, we were out visited all the plants Thursday, and Grassy Branch was running full, and school had been out for 3 weeks. And Tallwood, actually, half of it was empty. So I know that's the I coming into it. So it's just as busy on a rainy day as it is on a dry day when schools are in.
Well, yeah, Grassy Branch has 3 schools to it. Tallwood is pretty much a neighborhood, a residential package plant. So it's going to have flow, pretty much all day. The second thing I want to show you is the average actual daily flow plus the permitted. And this is, again, the latest data that we have. So if we if every developer overnight finished building out everything that they are permitted to build and connected to our sewer system, here's what those numbers look like. And you can see, we would be at 92% in 12 Mile, 85 in Crooked Creek. Sycamore, Tallwood pretty much don't change simply because they're closed systems and we are not allowing any new connections because they are residential package plants and they are small. Grassy Branch has its own unique set of circumstances, but with those schools sort of being closed, it still puts us at 86%. The numbers for 6 Mile and the east side, they go up a little bit. But they're still pretty good. They're below 80. So if you wanted to compare November 2019, I guess I'd say it's November 2020, 12 months later, what does that look like? 12 Mile has gone from, I'll say 55% actual flow to 70% actual flow, 4.1 to 5.25. And I would tell you that it is I'll tell you at the end, because I think all 5 plants are impacted by these things. Crooked Creek has gone from 1.21 to 1.14, from 64 to 60%. Old Sycamore is pretty flat, even though that's dropped off a little bit. Tallwood's dropped off a little bit, but again, those are closed systems. Grassy Branch has dropped off significantly, which is a relief for us. I think there are a couple of things in play, and the first is, it has been an incredibly wet year, and so we got to contend with all of that sort of flow, rainwater, and so that's the first thing you got to deal with. And Commissioner Rushing touched on it. The second thing is there's this pandemic that has, sort of occupied us for all of 2020. In some cases, it helps us, as in Grassy Branch is probably the best example. Schools are closed. We don't have to deal with the flow from those 3 schools into Grassy Branch, and that has helped our numbers. In other places, where it's, you would think, people are going to work, but they're now all working from home, those numbers, that residential flow is going to impact us somehow. Those were 2 things, and the third thing is just the growth in Union County. As we continue to grow, as connections continue to be made, these numbers are going to continue to go up, just incrementally, but consistently. And so those are the 3 things that are in play, and if you ask me, well, what percentage of that is pandemic related, what percentage is rainwater, what percentage is just regular growth, that is a hard thing to parse out in the data that we have. And I'm just going to be honest with you, it is hard to tell the impact the wettest year in the last 15 has had on our system, other than to say that it's driven all the numbers up. What impact has the pandemic had on your numbers? Don't know. In some cases, it's helped us. In some cases, it's probably made the numbers worse. What impact has new development had on your system? All I can say about new development is that with every connection, it chews up a little bit more capacity in our system. Yes, sir.
I think I want to point out the 84% that you're saying Grassy Branch. There's 2 neighborhoods you said feed that.
Loxdale
Yep.
and I think Smithfield Farm.
Smithfield Farms, okay. But the point I'm making is that we're at 84% and we don't have the schools. Schools, even though our numbers for 12 miles, 70, there's a lot of schools that feed to that. So we're not seeing that today because schools have been closed, basically.
Well, that's a fair point.
The potential, these numbers could be worse if we'd have had a full production school system running.
Well, see, this is part of that is actually a fair point that you make, and it's, yes, we're not having to deal with the flow from the schools, but they are Union County students, Union County residents, so if they're not at school, they're probably at home. So even if it's a school in 12-mile basin, they're probably living in 12-mile basin, but to be able to sort of figure that out is almost impossible.
The impact would be different. The impact would be different too, because a lot of the schools in the west, they have homes with sewer, where in the east,
That's
like
true.
at Piedmont,
That's true.
Unionville, Piedmont Middle, there are kids that are coming from the New Salem, Marshville type area.
Yeah, and for Grassy Branch, it's such a small service area. I mean, it is a tiny service area. So when all those students are coming in, it really has an impact on Grassy Branch because it's such a small package plant. So when those students are home, it doesn't impact Grassy Branch. It doesn't impact the surrounding sewer system because, just like you said, Commissioner Rushing, they may be on septic. Whereas in 12 Mile, it's just a completely different behavior pattern.
Well, it's not totally. I'm in 12 Mile, and my neighborhood is all on septic. And there's a lot of neighborhoods over there. So I'm saying there's some impact.
Yes.
And I understand your concept if they're at home using the facilities or a school using the facilities, it'll make a difference. But I think we need to be cautious that our numbers may be very conservative.
That's a fair point, and that's worth keeping an eye on because I think that only helps make the case for the slides that are coming. To be complete, I just wanted to show you the actual, if I showed you just the actual average daily flow, what I'm going to show you now is the actual plus permitted. So in 2019, the actual plus permitted, these are what the flow numbers would look like if everything connected. You can see we're close in 12 Mile, right there at Crooked Creek. We're fine on Oldwood, Old Sycamore. Tallwood, we're okay simply because we're not adding any new connections. If the state asks you, what's your plan? I tell them, we're fine because we're not adding any new connections. It's a closed system. Grassy Branch, you can see we're at 120. Currently, our numbers we're looking at 92 at 12 Mile if everything connected. That's permitted. 85 in Crooked Creek, and again, I'll telegraph it for you. I'm going to ask you to make some decisions on those two sewer basins. Again, we're fine on Old Sycamore, we're fine on Tallwood, and again, we've gotten some relief at Grassy Branch, but we still need to do something at Grassy Branch.
Can I ask you a question because of our interaction last week? Grassy Branch is 50,000,
Yes, sir.
and your staff told us sometimes it hits 150,000, and that's when we have our problems.
Yes, sir.
So are these numbers based on any of the inflow as well?
These numbers are based on November 2020 numbers, which basically takes a rolling average of the last 12 months. So yes, it would take into account the rainfall, it would take into account the change in schools. And I'll tell you, when it comes to Tallwood, part of the reason why the numbers have gone down is because we've done such a good job with the inflow and infiltration. And one of there's a new handout in your packet, I'll call it attachment 4, is just a document, because in anticipation of the question, what are you doing about inflow and infiltration? I actually had staff create a document about inflow and infiltration, what we're doing out at all the sewer basins. And so in Tallwood, they've gone through and dealt with I&I as best as they could, and that's part of the reason why you're seeing the drop in flow. Yes, sir.
Go ahead. Another thing that I don't think most citizens in Union County realize, the 12 Mile Creek and the Crooked Creek, they receive sewage from areas outside our rezoning power. They receive wastewater from Waxhaw, Indian Trail, Stallings, Wesley Chapel.
Yes.
And we have no control over those communities. We only control unincorporated.
In terms of zoning, yes. Mr. Manager?
Just a commentary for the board regarding Grassy Branch. Board members, you are aware, you've heard us, staff talk about the voluntary order of consent that staff has been negotiating with the Department of Environmental Quality over the last year. The DEQ finally sent us a draft of that voluntary consent order last week. Our legal staff is reviewing that along with our public works staff. We're suggesting some additional edits to that, but at some point, probably in the next 30, 45 days, you will see that voluntary order of consent come to you on a regular board agenda for approval. What that voluntary consent order does, it's a contract between Union County and the DEQ that basically says we are taking mitigating steps in Grassy Branch because we know we have inflow infiltration issues there. We know we have limited capacity to treat, and we know we're getting larger flows than what our capacity allows. It also sets out some timelines, or presumably will set out some timelines for mitigation or what do you call restoration or repair or replacement of that facility. So just wanted the board to be aware that you will, in the very near future, see that come to you on a regular board agenda. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Manager, I have a question about that I forgot to ask last week. If we do go with another package plant beside the old one at Grassy Branch, will that add to our capacity there? In other words, are we actually adding more capacity so we can handle the?
Yes, sir. I'm answering your question, yes. So the solution right now at Grassy Branch is to add an additional 70,000 gallons worth of capacity, treatment capacity out at Grassy Branch. And so that would be basically adding a whole nother package plant right beside the 50,000 gallon one. So it'd be 50 plus 70, So we have a capacity of 120,000 gallons. And that costs about $3 million to do that.
It
And that
takes
was-
about 5 years, right?
In working with the state for permitting and design, and then actually getting it out there, I think 5 years, maybe less. I'm looking to my folks to tell me if that's the case, if I missed anything on that.
It will take us 5 years from start to finish on that.
Well, I guess I'm looking to you, John, if you want to just unmute your mic and tell me, or tell the board, roughly what the timeline would be, or Andy, I guess, since you're the one working with the state, so what's the timeline for that?
Yes, so right now, in the consent order, there's about a 5-year window for compliance to do the construction work. That's just in the consent order. The actual construction of the new footprint can be done quicker. So it just all depends on how fast, the design and construction occurs.
Mr. Chairman.
Commissioner Rushing.
And I guess my question would be, if we're going to build so we have 50,000 capacity there now, and we're going to build another 70,000 capacity, are we going to do away with the 50,000 capacity?
No, sir.
Do
We
both
need
of them?
both.
So we're opening that area up for residential development?
No, sir, we are not.
Yeah.
We need. the
Those three
70
schools are not going to use
Well,
double
we-
the
well,
sewer.
The way we are envisioning it, we need that additional 70,000 to treat our existing flows, not to add new flows.
So you need twice the amount to treat 120% capacity.
Yes, sir.
And right now, you don't have 120%, you have 86%.
Yes.
So keep in mind that the state, it's a good question. The state really, they're not looking at this from a perspective that the schools aren't operating right now. They're looking at this at some point in the future, those schools may be operating and probably will be operating as they were in the past. And when those schools are operational, we'll go back to that same 120% or higher. So their order is really about how do we manage that maximum number. Not that we add additional houses, because we can't. We have to have that just to manage the schools when they come on. Now granted, it seems like everything's great right now, and it is, but the state's not giving us a break for that. They know that we've already had problems with this system, and they're anticipating it continuing, so that's why the order gives us some time, it gives us up to 5 years, but they are going to require us to over more than double the system to handle those flows.
So the state won't allow any new development on that
Well,
70,000?
obviously, if we wanted to propose to the state that we wanted more than 70,000 gallons, certainly we could. That's not what we're doing. We're proposing that we're going to manage the flows as they are and not add additional flow.
What if we went to the school system, and we may have already done it, I mean, you may have already talked to the school system about it, and looked at some, water saving features there in the school system, because we know, we can see through the numbers that there is definitely an issue there. Then if we went to the school system and did maybe water saving upfits on the restrooms.
That is an excellent question, and I actually have an answer to that one, but I'll just put Andy and his staff on notice, so if they need to jump in here, because I'm getting my chemistry all mixed up, that they can do that. So that question actually came up last week on the tour. And so it's not really just a function of less flow, but it's also the concentration of chemicals that come in the wastewater stream. So when you take out the water from the flow, you're getting a higher concentration of urine and all the other chemicals that come in that stream. And so we actually need the water to help dilute the flow and to be able to treat it effectively. Otherwise, the process train that we have out at Grassy Branch won't be able to treat it. So it's a very complicated system to manage. Yes, we want less flow, and there's a way to do it. But then what that means is you're getting a higher concentration of chemicals, ammonia, whatever else in the waste stream. And that's a whole entire different problem.
Well, an equalization tank, like you're using in, you're talking about using in the northern part, in the Indian Trail area, why not, is there, to equal out that average daily flow and to take care of some of those high flow events, why would we not think about an equalization tank?
I think, Andy, if you want to jump in, I'm going to say jump in, but if you go out to Grassy Branch, you will see that that particular treatment package plant is operating flat out all the time, 24 hours a day. And so adding an equalization tank really doesn't buy you anything. You need additional treatment capacity.
Commissioner Ray?
Yes, if I could, can I?
Yeah, go ahead,
can I-
Andy.
Yeah, if I could add a little bit to that. Yeah, so we've had consistent high flow violations out at Grassy just because Grassy Branch itself is capacity limited. And what happens with the high flows, basically other treatment parameters like total suspended solids and fecal matter can bypass some of the treatment train. And what we need to do, an equalization chamber simply won't suffice to meet all the treatment requirements that we're going to need to meet with a consent order. So we want to be sure that we can meet all the permit parameters under the order, and then post-order, once Grassy is online in its future normal configuration at 120, that we can meet all the treatment parameters we need to.
Commissioner Rushing, I had the same questions you did. We're thinking the same way, and what they explained to me was there's so much infiltration and inflow. We could help the school system with low-flow commodes and no-flow commodes, but like I said, we were out there last week, and it was running wide open, and schools were closed. So
It was full.
it was full, yeah.
And I think if it can, one lesson I hope that we as a county can learn from this, and I have history with this because we were talking about this 20 years ago. Here's a situation where we have a fix for the schools, where we put sewer on the schools, and then, well, we got a little bit left over, so why don't we give some neighborhoods and approve some developments on this? So we approved a couple developments on it, not a lot, just a couple. And now, 20 years later, we're a polluter. We're overflowing, going into the creeks. So now a new board, 10, 15, 20 years from now, is going to be faced with the decisions that we're making today. So when I look back at this, and this is at 86%, 120%, you see the 92%, at some point, we're going to have to look at a board and look at our policies and improving neighborhoods, that we're not doing it in a vacuum, because these three schools, they expanded. I mean, back then, we were going to build a sewer plant on Rocky River, and it was no harm, no foul. We'll fix this later. And sometimes later don't get fixed. Sometimes people change their minds. Sometimes things stop. The economy changes. And I think that I would ask that you as a staff going forward, make sure that you're taking those things into consideration, and that we're not approving neighborhoods because we have the capacity, but because it makes sense. And maybe we should look harder at how fast we're approving sewer on these neighborhoods. Because again, back then, if we'd have known then what we know now, maybe we'd have done a little bit different.
I guess just to close out the conversation on Grassy, spending $3 million or whatever on an additional 70,000 gallons of treatment capacity out at Grassy is not ideal. It's something we're going to have to do to be in compliance with the state requirements. It is not something we should want to do, simply because it's just money that's wasted, because at some point, all of that's going to hopefully go offline. It is the nature of the beast that we're going to have to spend money out there. So with that, I'm just going to move on, give you some examples, because again, I think this is important for just context, is some of the type of developments that we're permitting. When they come to us, and these are all permitted, and the title here is Examples of Development Flows. So the first is in Indian Trail. It's an apartment and slash hotel, and it's about 55,000 gallons. The atrium, the hospital that's going up, the first phase, installings, is 109,000. Marvin Gardens is a commercial development. I think it's a shopping center, Harris Teeter, with a bunch of smaller parcels. Publix, I'm so sorry, Publix. It's 12,000 gallons of flow. Crestwinds, Weddington Point are two different types of single-family neighborhoods. The first is age-restricted. The second is just, I think, 250 lots, and you can see the flows there. And for Crestwinds, it's only the first phase of Crestwinds that's permitted for 42,000 gallons. So when we get requests for new development, they're big numbers. They can be big numbers. And just to give you context, so when you see more numbers about permitted flows, give you some idea what you're dealing with.
Hung, that Crestwinds you mentioned there, is that the one on Potter Road you're talking about, 600 homes? And it is, because we talked about that just earlier today, and you thought it wasn't permitted yet.
Yeah,
but-
I wasn't sure, and,
Okay.
confirmed it's only phase one, so not all 600.
So that's a couple hundred houses, not all 600.
Yeah, for all of Crestwinds, it would be about 170,000 gallons. So 42, I'd say it's about a quarter of the Crestwinds development.
Great.
I guess to say to Commissioner Rushing that I have tried to fight the good fight. When I was out there last Thursday, I asked y'all, what could we do at Grassy Branch and not have to spend any more money there? What would be the solution? Do you remember what one of your staff said?
I honestly, I don't know, and I'm not going to attempt to guess, so if you want to.
And I didn't want to hear it, but he said, build Lower Crooked Creek. And I thought, I mean, I'm not a proponent of Lower Crooked Creek, but if we spend 5 to 8 million there, it's only for what we have. You can't grow on it any. I mean, it's like, you know what you want to do, but the facts just keep pushing you another way. And
Well,
it's scary.
let me sort of
Just
take.
give one point to make to that, and that's, again, what I've been saying for a long time, is that is the goal, is that Lower Crooked Creek plant that's the end game in all this. And no matter what we talk about or what we say, that's what they're selling us on. And they've been selling on this for years. So everything that makes sense is gonna be build a new sewer plant, which is, again, back to why my concerns with sending so much water to the western, Indian Trail area of the county, is that is the game. And whether you agree with growth or disagree with growth, the decisions we make are taken out of our hands. Like you said, earlier, Indian Trail has their own zoning, Stallings has their own zoning, Fairview, Unionville, and these decisions that we make are gonna have an impact on, this is the beginning of it. And we need to understand as a board that if we vote in support of these things, that we also have to support high-density development, because that's what pays the bills, and don't even pay the bill. That's what Brian was saying earlier. That's why I was asking him, what is the number? Is it 20,000 per house? Is it 40,000 per house?
More than 11,000.
Yes, more than 11,000.
Yes, sir.
So what is the cost that this growth would actually pay for that? And it wouldn't be subsidized by the people who live here today. And one thing that we didn't talk about with those numbers, there is going to be an impact of people conserving water and using sewer with the rate increases. People are going to, that's the one reason to raise rates, is that people adjust their habits. They take showers instead of baths. They don't wash, they use high efficiency washing machines, things like that. They do adjust. That is the goal of that, is to have people adjust their habits and water use. So the decisions that we're making aren't made in a bubble. They're long reaching, just like those two neighborhoods that were approved many years ago, You know, we'd never thought that we'd have used that up, but we did. But yeah, this all goes to building a sewer plant in western Union County for the municipalities over there to approve development on.
Now, one more thing, and I like the Tallwood plan. I told Hung, I thought if everybody saw it, they would agree to pay the difference because it is so professional looking. But I'm on board today to fix Grassy Branch, not to take more capacity, but to mitigate our problem with the state so that it's solved.
Well, thank you for that, because we're going to need it. We're going to need your support.
I think we as a board need to understand, right now, we've had a propensity for approving high density, and now it's catching up with us. And we need to be careful. I don't know, I respectfully disagree with Commissioner Rushing that high density is the only solution to help pay for the future. What I don't want to happen 8 to 10 years from now when we say the doors are closed because we don't have wastewater, and we're approaching that. I mean, your numbers, I appreciate them, and I know you've scrubbed them, but clearly it's an alarming report that we're running out of runway, and this board needs to be diligent and plan for the future. And I probably won't be around, but I'll have children and grandchildren that will need the facilities to accommodate the growth. We've had 20% in the last 10 years. Union County is very attractive. It's out in the general public, it's a place to be. And we don't want to destroy that by not planning ahead and being prepared for these challenges. And, you know, water, 8 years ago, we signed a contract with the Yadkin to fix that, and it's coming to fruition. Well, I think it's behoove of us to think about wastewater as a necessity, and it's not something to keep people out. It's to manage the growth that we will inherently have.
And Mr. Chairman, if I might, I don't think that we're necessarily at odds on where we have a disagreement is, I think with the high density is in order to pay for it, you know, why build it if you don't have to pay for it? And if you don't build it, if you don't expand these plants as rapidly, at 12 Mile Creek, we have a 12 million gallon. We're about half of that, maybe.
7.5, about 60%.
Yeah, so not even halfway there, and you see all the growth and the issues that we're having there with traffic and things like that. But many years ago, the decisions were made to build and expand that sewer plant, and then the decision came to us about building a sewer plant on Rocky River. And the people there said, no, we really don't want that growth, we don't. So a few of us commissioners decided not to build that. And that has limited the growth. There's been growth in that area, but it's very limited, and it's not high density. It's low density growth because you have to have septic tanks, not, you can't just, you can't put in a quarter acre lots when you don't have sewer. So again, if we as a board, and I think your goal is to lessen the number of high density developments, and you've voted consistently, been very consistent in it. I don't have a question about that. But what I'm saying is that we have to be careful if that's your thought, and a thought, I know Commissioner Williams got elected with that same thought. I know others of us have campaigned on managing growth, and what I'm telling you through experience, through 20 years of experience on this board, is that the way that you manage growth in Union County with 14 municipalities is you limit the availability of sewer treatment plants. If you do that, if you hold back and don't expand as rapidly, and what happens is we get kind of painted into a corner, and then we're told, well, you have to do this. This is not an option. And I would rather say up front that, hey, if you want to build a neighborhood, pay for the sewer plant. If you developers, we can't subsidize you anymore. We can't subsidize you with this. Brian's already pointed that out. $11,000 doesn't cover it. And so we got to decide if we're going to be a community that grows in residential development through our municipalities and through our county, Or are we gonna be somebody who says, okay, we're gonna slow down the sewage and the sewer treatment plant expansions in this county? And I'm for that. But if you approve them, you gotta pay for them. And what I'm seeing now as a water customer is that I'm paying for sewer in western Union County, and I live in eastern Union County. So not only am I, do we have more traffic, not only do we have to pay higher school taxes, now we're gonna have to pay to subsidize the building in the first place. And it's not, I'm not saying right or wrong, I like growth, I think growth is great. But if we're as a board, if we're gonna go down a direction, we can't contradict ourselves. We can't build sewage and then at the same time say, we're not gonna, we really don't need it because we're going low density. And that's where I'm at, and that's where I've been and trying to, in my arguments to this board, and my arguments, through the whole thing have been, if we don't like high density, if we don't want high density residential, then why expand the sewer plant? If we would say, okay, we're gonna hold off and say commercial development, we want it, we're gonna have sewer available for it, we can do that today. We can't do that if we continue to approve residential developments on sewage. Because if we do that, then we will run out of sewer unless we build more sewer plants, which goes back to the more problem, more growth. And whether we do it or a town does it, whoever does it, somebody always got to get three hands in the air. We know that. I mean, everybody on here knows three hands in the air means a lot. And it can move mountains. But it can be done in a town, it can be done on this board, it can be done anywhere. And as long as the sewer's there to handle it, there's nothing that can stop it.
Commissioner Rushing, I'm like you, I get county water and septic, and my water comes from Anson. But I don't feel like we're not paying for Western Union County sewage. We're paying, the increase is helping for the Yadkin project.
Which is gonna require sewer. It's gonna require.
It doesn't
sewer.
require it, it feeds into it.
It doesn't require it, you're absolutely right, but I do want to point this out, and Commissioner Rushing makes some very good points. But the board has given us a direction that you want us to find ways to serve the more rural areas of our county with water, and that's a great idea, and that's something that we're working towards. But I don't want anyone to misunderstand. When you provide water to very, very low dense areas, to pay for that over time, you have to have a balance for where you have areas where you have some high density. What is high density? Is that 2 units to the acre, 4, 5? I can't answer that question. But you cannot pay for it with 1 unit to the acre development and serve 10 houses on 2 miles of water line. You can't. So over time, the board has to have a philosophy of balance. If we're going to serve very rural areas, how do we balance that out with more dense areas to be able to make sure it is manageable and affordable? Now, if your philosophy is you want to stop growth or you want to have an impact on growth, I shouldn't say stop, you want to have an impact on growth, that's fine. But there will be consequences that come from that decision. Commissioner Rushing's absolutely right. At some point in time, you will have a decision of, do we approve a wastewater treatment plant to allow for greater density in areas where density wants to go? So where we can serve areas where density doesn't want to go with water. It's a philosophy. And we're going to be asking you for that direction very soon because we're at the point at which it's jump off or not. So you're right, but I want to make sure everyone understands there is a cause and effect here. We have a decision. What we do does affect our current customers as well as future customers.
One more thing, and I would encourage anybody that wanted to take that tour, because it's very informational. And basically what I saw was they broke the Lower Crooked Creek plant down into 3 segments. Acquire the land, the balance, or the place where they would like for it to be, to land bank it. Go after the necessary permits, and then somewhere down the road, build the plant. And I told them where I stood on building the plant. But I think there's certain parts that we've got to do, especially like with Grassy Branch. We spend $5 million just to get us out of a fine, and we have not been fined. They've working it through an order.
Of consent.
Right. But what I'm saying is, to assume in 50 years, this county is gonna be just like it is now, it's not gonna be.
And I don't, listen, I know, and here's the reality of this. This board, we used to talk daily, Dennis, we don't hardly talk anymore. Richard, you and I used to talk daily, hardly ever talk anymore, because of these issues. And this is we have things coming up, like ETJ, for example. The towns are wanting ETJ because they're tired of high-density development around the town. Well, a town, that's where the high-density development is supposed to be. But they don't want to approve it because their voters, the people, have said enough. They're screaming, enough, enough. So we're going to end up having discussions about taking people's property rights away from them with no vote for that town council on ETJ. And when we could just, again, we could just stop it with some of the policies that we have with sewer and water. We need commercial development. We beg for commercial development, but we see that we can't even, we've been told, we can't even hold it for commercial development if a residential wants it. So we're just building it, and it can be taken up by a town. It can be taken up by one town, two towns. It can be taken up by the county. There's just no rhyme or reason to it. And Mark, Mark and I have had this conversation before. Mark and I have seen this over the years. Sewer has been the wedge that has come between managers and commissioners and I'm pretty strong in my opinion on it because it's an educated opinion. And I just want us to understand, again, if we all five need to decide where we're going, because this decision is going to be a 50-year decision. This isn't a 2-year term, 4-year term. This isn't decisions that are to be made lightly. And if we decide to go that way, the towns need to understand that, hey, we're going this way, and you need to come with us this way. The towns need to be in on it, because we can't go against the grain with the towns, and then the towns get together like they have in the West and say, well, we're not going to put up with this. We're going to tell all our people to vote for somebody else. Because that next person comes in, you got to pay for it once you start building it. Mike, Mr. Yee? If you decide to build it, it's got to be built. You got to pay for it. And it can't be 3 commissioners coming in saying, we disagree with what y'all did.
I'd like to say, I know that we've looked at studies over the past couple of years, and I think by 2030, best guess estimates is we'll be over 300,000 people in Union County. And this is, even McKibben was giving us some of that information, that it's going to be growing. And we're looking at, if we talk about a Lower Crooked Creek right now, we're talking about, the other day we were talking 8 to 10 years to have something working. Well, 8 to 10 years, in 8 to 10 years, we'll have over 300,000 people here, and we won't be able to accommodate it. So I agree with Commissioner Rushing. We've got to do something. We've got to work smart. And I don't think stopping the economy of Union County, which loses jobs for people, is the right way to do it. We need to be planning, just like we did with the Yadkin. The Yadkin is something that's going to provide us water for the next 75 to 100 years. And I think we should be proud of that. And wastewater is our challenge right now. So it's something that we should consider very, very diligently to make sure that we do the right thing. And it's, one of the things too that a lot of people don't know, we're meeting with the towns to explain our water and sewer capacity. I know this Western Union group, Brian and myself, we met with the mayors there. And as a matter of fact, Saturday night, I had conversation with the mayor of Waxhaw, trying to schedule us to come in and talk about the capabilities and what the exposure. And I'm glad this is YouTube because it does provide some information that our counterparts in municipalities need to understand. We've got constraints. We got constraints. And I tell you what, it's easy to talk when you live in the east about it's okay to put the high density in the west, and it's killing us. The roads can't handle it, the schools can't handle it. And when you put another high density in the west, they bust the kids to the east. That's their policy right now.
Well, Mr. Chairman, I live as far as east as anybody on this board, and I can tell you, I'm telling you the way to slow it down, and you can't build that sewer plant and then not build the high density to go along with it.
Well, I respectfully disagree, and we've had that conversation before, so let's continue on.
I was
okay?
going to say, maybe that's a good point for me to sort of take you through some additional information and details that might be helpful for your discussion. So currently, I would say this is what our wastewater strategy is. And our strategy is basically manage capacity as best as we can by implementing capital projects that help us manage capacity, that sort of give us some relief in the short term. A good example of that is the Poplin EQ Basin. We build that. That'll give us a little bit more capacity, 800,000 gallons of capacity that we can permit if we need to, although in the Poplin Basin. You've had discussion about it, but I'm going to tell you, the part of the strategy is to build the Lower Crooked Creek wastewater reclamation facility as a long-term solution. When I say long-term, it's 50 years. And the two things I'll point out as to why this is in this strategy is the board, maybe not this board, but the board back in 2006 adopted this strategy as part of their 2016 master plan. When you adopted the 2016 master plan, this was part of that strategy. You asked staff to go back and look at it again in 2019. They did, and we presented it to you at the 2019 retreat. And then you took a vote on it a couple of months later, and you've, again, adopted Lower Crooked Creek as part of that strategy. I'm going to, for the purpose of this discussion and the discussion going forward, we pretty much took it off the table as a thing. But I'm coming back to you and asking you for a third time, what do you think of this as a strategy, long-term for the county as a way to deal with wastewater? And I'm going to present you some information and ask you again. My interest is not growth or no growth. That's not my job. My interest is I know how much wastewater flow is coming through this county, and I got to find a way to treat it. And I know how much we think is going to come in the future, and I got to find a way to treat it. And I'll explain to you why I think this is the best solution. But ultimately, the board's got to do, what the board think is in the best interest, and we'll follow that decision as best as we can, which is what I told Commissioner Rushing on Thursday. Whatever the board direction is, we'll take that as direction and we'll follow it. But the other thing that we are doing is we're in the process, excuse me, right now of updating our master plan. So it's been a while. It's worth a full-blown update. We had a 2016 sort of interim update. It's now time to really update the master plan. So we're working with an engineering firm, Brown and Caldwell, to do that over the next year and a half. We're going to send more information to you in the near future. We're actually going to ask for your involvement in the near future. But we just wanted to let you know that we are updating all of our master plans, including incorporating the East Side Sewer Study, which is a short-term immediate needs kind of assessment, into how we think about the long-term, especially on the east side. And lastly, I will tell you, we're going to manage capacity as best as we can within the limits that we have. Until there is relief or there isn't. And there's going to be some choices for the board to make, and they're going to come in the next couple of slides. And part of it is, an example is, there may be no new permits, no new development permits coming forward. And that is it just is what it is. And so we're going to take you through every sewer basin and tell you sort of what's going on, because each sewer basin is different and unique. So what you're seeing here, again, this should be familiar to at least 4 of you because you were there in November. This is 12-mile wastewater treatment plant. You can see the service area. It serves the 12-mile basin. And then that sort of area to the north of it is the Poplin Basin. So we pump through a force main, this big long yellow force main, the Poplin Basin down into 12-mile, which is about 1.5 million gallons per day. That's important. because that contributes to the capacity limitations out at 12 miles. So 7.5 MGD, great looking plant. You can obviously see that it's been sized and designed to handle expansion, and that's how that facility is designed. In terms of permitted flow, what you're seeing here is permit data, new development. These are developers coming in asking for permission to connect to our system, basically our permits. You can see it over time from 2001 to 2020. It goes up and down. One year, 2010, we had no permits, but development trends. What's in the pipeline is that column to the right, beyond 2020, is we know right now in the pipeline that there are almost 500,000 gallons worth of new projects that are asking for permission to connect to our system in the 12-mile basin.
Not have been approved, but asking for permission, is that correct?
That is correct. Not permitted, not approved yet, but they are asking for permission to connect.
Mr. Chairman, might I ask for a 5-minute recess for a point of personal privilege?
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Good stopping point. Let's take a 10-minute break. Come back at 3:35.
I couldn't wait any longer.
Okay, so I'm getting the go-ahead from the manager, so I'm gonna, knowing how many slides I've gotten through in the first hour and a half, I'm gonna keep that in mind and try to pick it up a little bit. So what I showed you here is, 500,000 gallons sort of outstanding, and so what exactly does that mean? So at 12 Mile, again, current rated capacity is 7.5 million gallons per day. Current 12-month actual flow is 5.25. That puts us at 70% of capacity. That's the actual flow through the plant. What we have obligated, but not connected, so this is basically, we've permitted it, we've approved it, but they have not yet connected, is another I'll just round to 1.7 million gallons. If all of that connected at once, that would put us at 92.5%. That additional 500,000 gallons, the 4.49, projects in review but not yet permitted, if they all connected, that would put us at 99.1% of the plant's capacity. And again, the 80-90 rule would kick in here. We're at 70 according to the 80-90 rule, so we're okay. But again, you can look at some of these obligated numbers and then the projected numbers, and you can see just how quickly things we might run out of capacity. So even with the 1.5 million MGD expansion that was just completed, our capacity to treat new flows, it gets chewed up.
Now, Hungley, how long did that 1.5 million take once we approved it to start the project? Wasn't it about 3 years?
When you say approved it you mean to construct?
Yes, to construct and bring it online. It was
Oh,
a
okay.
little over 3 years, wasn't it?
I'm not sure, John. Do you have an answer for that?
Yeah, it was about 3 years.
Okay,
We wrapped it up in November of 2019.
okay, thank you, John.
So just for your information, next expansion is for 9, to go from 7.5 to 9. That work is not slated to start until 2034. And it's estimated to be $42 million, and I'll say in 2034 dollars. So we figure, here's what it'll cost to build. We know we're not building it for another 14 years. Here's what we think the inflation is. It'll be about $42 million in 2034 dollars to build that next 1.5 million increment. The plan, part of the reason why it's not planned until 2034, even though it looks like right now we could build it now and we'd benefit from it, is the Poplin Basin flows into 12 Mile. Part of the master plan strategy was to build this Lower Crooked Creek plant and to divert 1 million to 1.5 million gallons from Poplin Basin to the Lower Crooked Creek. So that immediately frees up 1.5 million gallons of capacity at 12 Mile. So if you're wondering, well, 2034 seems like a long way away, that's part of the reason why. So I'm going to tell you, this is the slide where I'm going to ask you to make some decisions about 12 Mile or give us some direction as to what you want to do about 12 Mile, what's going on at 12 Mile.
I want to talk, McKeown, can you go back to the slide where you show all the plants and the capacity where it's like 80, yeah, that one right there. So as you can see here at the percent of permitted flow, you've got 92% right now with 12 Mile Creek. And obviously some of that number is related to wet weather flows, and we can't tell you how much that is. And there's no guarantee that next year that will change, because it all depends on what the weather is for next year. Same thing with Crooked Creek, we're at 85%. And we have projects that are lined up and going through the review process, but not approved. And so therefore, they're sort of in the hopper. And while I did send an email out saying that we're not asking the board to make any decisions, I am going to renege on that, and I am going to ask the board today to consider a recommendation that we have moving forward with these projects, and that is that at 95% of actual and permitted flows, that we would discontinue issuing permits for those facilities. Now, we do gain capacity over time if wet weather flows change, those types of scenarios are different. And so we do try to actually go out and look at those over time. We're recommending quarterly, we'll reevaluate, see where those projects are. And I'm asking the board's approval for us to establish that at 95% of actual and permitted, that we will not permit any additional projects in those two plants until such a time that a longer-term solution is put in place. And the reason for that is, obviously, we have projects that are out there that are going through some level of review, and I don't want to mislead the development community that they can continue to submit projects and there isn't an issue here. Because there is an issue, and we want to make sure that we're transparent with our development community and our property owners, and also to be conservative and not overextend ourselves. So you may not want to take that action up today, but I'm asking you to consider possibly taking that action up today.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, sir.
I'll make that motion if you want to, because I think it's the right thing to do for the development community, for the people who are investing money now. I think it's absolutely the right thing to do. And so I'll make that motion that we stop permitting new development once 95% of capacity is reached.
Would that be in any of our facilities? Because at Crooked Creek, I believe, in some later slides, you're going to be
Yes,
asking
that
for the
would
We
be-
exact
were,
same thing.
we were asking for both the
That would be
Crooked
any
Creek
of the
Basin and
facilities.
12 Mile.
Right.
Yes, that'd be countywide policy.
All right, can I ask that you modify that just a bit? Is that you hold your motion and hear a couple more of the slides? I've got a question for you that I'd like to understand, because you say you got 1.5 million gallons that will, once we have the Yadkin water, there's 1.5 million that won't have to be sent back. But yet, where are you gonna process that 1.5 million gallons?
Are you talking about the Poplin going to 12?
Yeah, that's going to 12 mile an hour. Are you
Oh.
still,
Lower Crooked Creek.
are you still allowed to send that much affluent back over the basin?
That's a very good question. So the only way that works is if Lower Crooked Creek is actually a reality. The board approves Lower Crooked Creek at some point in the future being constructed. That's the only way to pump that's the only way for Poplin then to not pump over to 12 Mile Creek. So until that decision is made, until that actually comes to fruition, that sewage from the Poplin pump station will always pump over to 12 Mile Creek. Now, at some point in the future, if the board were to approve that, there is still the ability to manage the IBT with some flows back and forth. But the goal was always, again, in the 2016 master plan, to give the 12 Mile Creek plant some of its capacity back. That's why it's 13 years out, and that's why Lower Crooked Creek was more in the 8-year range, because Lower Crooked Creek was supposed to come on first, and then it would give back some capacity to 12 Mile, but that would also allow for some time in between the two to manage that.
But I guess I'm still trying to get clarification. In 2024, when we have Yadkin water, we won't need the Catawba water over the basin, in the Yadkin basin.
We will still need to manage our IBT, because understand, we still have wastewater on that side.
But I'm saying the IBT allows you to send that wastewater back
Correct.
for a period of time, even though we're not using the Catawba water in the Yadkin basin.
We will still use some Catawba water, but not as much. That is the plan in the future.
I think I might understand the question. Right now, all the Catawba water, that's all we have to put there, and we have to put some back.
That's
So
correct.
Yes,
we're
to
using
mitigate.
more, yeah, we're using more,
Right.
but more than our IBT. So whatever we're using over the IBT of 5 million gallons, we have to put back. So if we're using 8 million gallons, we have to put 3 million gallons. If we're using 6 million gallons, we have to put 1 million gallons
I
back.
understand that.
So as soon as we make a decision on the Lower Crooked Creek plant, if we're gonna build it or not, then automatically you free up 1.5 million gallons a day for.
Roughly.
For the Catawba Basin, for Weddington, Wesley Chapel, Waxhaw,
The 12-mile
Marvin.
basin.
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
We free that back up, so you immediately gain day one, 1.5 million gallons. So what we do here would be, just say, basically, you're putting a hold until we make a decision on the Crooked Creek plant.
Yes, sir.
You're putting a hold on any more people coming in for rezonings, any more people coming in for, permits to the, basically, there would be no reason to come in for a permit if we put a hold on it at 95%.
Yes, sir. So I want to clarify, people can apply for a rezoning.
Yeah.
But
That doesn't mean.
But they
that-
won't have a sewer permit.
That's right. We will not have the ability to serve the project.
And to put a face on it, I just did the math, 750 houses is what based on 300 gallons a day, that's what 3% is at 12 Mile Creek.
Did you get your question answered, sir? I'm sorry if I sort of kind of in a roundabout way.
Yeah, I agree with Commissioner Rushing. We need to implement this 95% rule because we are running out of runway, and it's not fair to our municipalities for them not to understand that, you know, they can commit to a developer and they won't have the resources to function. So, but we've got to manage that capability.
Yeah, I think for the record, I just want to state that, you know, some staff, you know, especially Andy, who's operating these facilities, would prefer a much lower number. But 95 seems to be a good compromise between sort of where we are and sort of giving the development community some notice about what's going to happen in the future at the current rate of using up the capacity.
Would you like it to be 92?
Well, that
I'm
pretty much.
serious, I'm not joking.
Well, if you're putting me on the spot, yes, I would prefer 92 to 95.
Modify the motion to say 92%. Would that affect anything that's currently in the pipeline?
Well, what that would effectively do is we're already at 92%
Mhm.
for.
Permitted capacity.
For 12 miles, so we would not permit any. more
Permitted and
projects.
pending. Current,
Well, no, those are projects that are permitted,
Permitted.
not those, if they're not permitted, and there are a number in the hopper that are going through the phase, you won't be able to approve any of those.
Yeah, right now, we are at 92%. So between our current actual flows, the 5.2 and the 1.69, that puts us at 92%. That means any project that is currently in the process of being reviewed for a sewer connection permit, they would basically not be able to get one if you did it at 92, which is why 95 is the compromise.
so we're at 79% now.
If you look at the slide that I have up right now, we're at, in 12 Mile, we are at actual flows 5.25, 70%. Add in the 1.69, which is the obligated, you know, they've already gotten approval to connect. That puts us at 92.5.
So that doesn't stop construction, it stops
That's
new
correct.
people from coming in.
That's correct. It doesn't stop anyone who's
Yeah.
received a permit and will ultimately build over time.
Yeah, there's 500,000 gallons in process that, you know, they've submitted their sketch plans and gone through some stage of review with new development. They would not be eligible to get a permit. They would not be approved at 92.
Until we make a decision later on this year.
I'm glad you pointed that out, because I wanted to make it clear that this is not the only heavy lift decision. In the April meeting, we will be asking the board to make a longer-term decision about capacity. That will be the Lower Crooked Creek. That will obviously be, what do we do with 12 Mile? Do we accelerate anything with 12 Mile? What do we do with East Side Sewer? Those are all things that we're gonna need board direction on at our April meeting. This one is a little bit more pressing and urgent because we're already at 92% on this particular project.
So just to clarify, when we're looking at this combined actual and permitted flow, the actual 2021 flow is a fixed number. That's looking back 12 months. It's not a rolling number.
It is a rolling average. So next month, we'll do the prior 12 months rolling average, and then 2 months from now, we'll look at the 12 months preceding. So that's why it's a rolling average.
So conceivably, if we head into the next 2 or 3 months and we have.
Zero
if you'll-
rain.
Yeah, if we have pardon the pun, a precipitous drop in precipitation, that could change this number, right?
It could.
Absolutely.
Well, that was the point of me showing you that graph about the rain and how what point you use really can change how much capacity you have. And so, so yes.
Let me ask you a question. The projects in review, are those ones that have been approved by this board or other boards?
Not all.
Some of them have been.
Some of them will be speculative in nature. Other those are ones that have been approved by this board or another board.
So we've already approved them, but
Approved for the
For them to-
rezoning or whatever that may be.
continue the process to come and ask you for capacity.
Yes, sir.
Okay, so since this is a rolling number, and since obviously this combined actual and permitted flow number is going to change, an important question, pretty much at every time a rezoning comes before us is going to be, what's our latest number?
We propose coming back quarterly and actually showing what our quarterly numbers are, and then we could get direction on whether or not to release some additional flow.
Okay, so as a board, we need to be prepared to make decisions based on the most recent quarterly combined actual and permitted flow number.
In the future, yes, sir.
Okay,
So presumably that would be the first meeting in April. That'll give you your first quarter numbers. And then the first of the month after every quarter thereafter. And we'll just continue to update the board as we roll through the calendar year in that manner.
okay, so until then, we're operating based on this number, which is the last 12 months,
Right.
plus our permitted flow. Okay,
Yes, sir.
thank you.
I got a question. Projects in review, define that. Give me a good definition of that.
Okay. So there's two types. One is someone has come forward with a rezoning, whether that's with us or whether that's with another jurisdiction. They've applied for a townhouse project, a commercial project that may have a shopping center. That's been approved, and therefore they are now working on engineering, basically in the background, preparing to submit for a request for a water and sewer extension. That's one. The other is someone who's actually speculating on a future rezoning, and they submit information for us to review in advance. That's not been approved by anyone, it's really more of they're speculating. Now, I want to stress something. There are a number of occasions when someone gets a rezoning approval, and it may never actually occur, or it may take years before that rezoning actually moves through the process. A lot of that depends on, do they have the financing on the developer to finish the project? Do they have the tenants? If it's commercial, what's actually in line for it? So when we tell you that it is permitted, that's important because that means that developer, that property owner has put enough money in it to finish engineering and have it sent to the state, and then the state has actually said, yes, you can permit this. It is likely those projects will finish. It will still take years for them to finish in most cases, but it's likely they will actually complete the project. Does that answer your question?
Question.
Brian, is there not one other category which would be a subdivision by right?
Yes, there certainly could be a subdivision by right. Those don't require extensions or permits necessarily. If they're not extending anything, they may not necessarily have an extension requirement. It just depends on what they're doing.
But these, on the projects in review, these people have already spent a lot of money getting to a point.
They have, absolutely. Now, I think what Young was trying to point out to you is that .49 up there, if you allow them to continue on as if they have some capacity, well, we might not have it, because whether flows may cause issues, there's other things going on, you're potentially putting yourself in a bind. And we don't recommend that you permit the project for more than what we can handle. So that's why we're more comfortable with 92, 95, but not going up to 100%. Does that?
What about 99.1? I mean, these people have spent, I don't know who they are. But
Well,
Not all of them have.
I wish I could give you a really good answer.
The way I would answer that, it may not be a good answer, but the way I would answer it is, you do not want your wastewater treatment facility running at 99.1% of capacity 100% of the time. That would be the equivalent of, as I said earlier to somebody else during the break, of putting your foot on the accelerator, taking your car up the red line and keeping it there.
Yeah.
These plants aren't designed for that. And
Commissioner Simpson?
Just to cut to the chase, I'll support Commissioner Rushing's motion, 95%, not at 92.
No, not 95 or 92, because they want 92.
Well, if you're asking me, I would take 92.
95, I will support
But-
the 95.
But 95 is a
For the
compromise.
reasons, for the reasons that Commissioner Rape has made. We don't know the level of financial commitment that some of these projects have made, and certainly we don't want to cut the legs out from someone. There's a little bit of, in other words, there's a little wiggle room between 92 and 95.
I agree.
And that was the
I'm
reason
willing to
why
s-
we
and I'm-
proposed 95. That was the reason.
And 95 right now, because of the wet weather, might be 92,
Yes.
you know.
Could be the driest summer we ever have on record.
So if you'll modify your motion, I'll support 95 as well,
Okay, 95.
but
Okay,
if you'll
95.
support.
Yeah, the only reason I
Modify.
modified because they asked for 92. But yeah, 95 is fine. And again, commissioners, this is, like you were saying, people commit real resources. So tomorrow morning, when this hits the news, all of a sudden, everybody and his brother who's got a project they're thinking about is going to come call Brian and say, hey, let me get in under the wire. And they start spending resources that we may not be able to. It may get further down the road, and they may have more resources before they find out that we don't have it to give to them. And I agree with this completely. I've been advocating for this for many years. So, yeah, modify it 95%.
Okay.
And just to summarize, using a 12-month actual flow that is calculated quarterly, plus permitted flow.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Now, is that something you'll be able to track as applications come in?
Yes, sir, we can track it.
Okay, all right. We have a motion on the floor. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, no opposed.
All right, so with that, I'm going to move on to Crooked Creek.
Well, you also need to get you a customer service apron, because tomorrow you're probably gonna be
Gonna be
very
busy.
busy.
I will go spend the evening looking for one.
And thank you, Assistant Manager Matthews, for saying that.
All right, so Crooked Creek is a 1.9 MGD facility. It is, you can see the service area. It is, it's basically straddles on either side of Independence Boulevard. It's really not that big. It is old. It is 1988. So here's the permitted flows and what was permitted in, 200,000 gallons in 2002. 2020 beat that, not by a lot, by a couple hundred gallons. What's in the pipeline is over 600,000 gallons of, projects asking for flow. And as we tried to figure out why, I think part of it is the opening of the bypass, and developers are starting to see that as a place along which to develop. So I think that's part of the reason why, but there's just a lot of projects coming into this particular area. In terms of numbers, 1.9 MGD facility, our current actual flows are 1.14, which is 60%. We have obligated but not permitted another 480,000 gallons, which takes us to 85%. And if you look at the projects in review, 650,000 gallons of capacity, that would take us to 120%. It is, obviously, we cannot permit all that. And so, and what you just voted on does the same thing, caps it at 95%. Site is landlocked. Just so you know, we did ask the state informally for additional, what would it take to get additional increase in our discharge permit, and both times they said no. And again, it was an informal conversation, but the likelihood of getting more discharge capacity at this location is unlikely. Again, same sort of thing. You've already decided on it, so if it's all right with you, I'm just going to keep on moving on.
Hung, I want to ask a question there.
Yes, sir.
Go back to the previous slide. No, one forward one. Can we make, I would support a formal request to increase the discharge permit at Crooked Creek. Just asking for it.
So I'm gonna give the board our opinion of what that may do. So keep in mind that we were having conversations with the state previously, but we were making no commitments. Long-term, your strategy is still a lower Crooked Creek plant. If we make a formal official request for additional discharge, we may very well jeopardize the lower Crooked Creek plant in the future. They may not allow you to have those discharge limits for that plant. Now, I can't say for a fact that will happen, but our conversations have not been productive if we talk about both discharges. So I want to just make the board aware that if we do make that request, we could cut our own foot off.
All right, well, let me ask you a question. If we asked for another 1.5 million and they gave it to us, would it take more than 1.5 million off Lower Crooked Creek, or just?
You may not get Crooked
You
Creek.
may not get it at all. And I can't say for a fact we won't, but I'd hate to sit here and not tell you that that is a concern that we have.
Yeah, and if I can add to that, well, the other thing I would tell you is, we never made it past, because, in anticipation of this meeting, I asked them, what does that mean, informal request? Had we gotten it, what would that mean? And just because they increased the discharge permit at Crooked Creek doesn't mean that we'd be able to build there. Because, as I tell you, 1, it's old, 2, it's landlocked. Any attempt to expand that beyond the current footprint would require more land, which we don't own, and the site isn't designed to handle more flow in its current configuration. It would be expensive to reconfigure Crooked Creek to handle more flow. So beyond the permit, we never got past the permit stage. But once you get past that, you're going to get to the engineering part, and it's
Right.
going to be an expensive solution.
Well,
And
let's just get on first base before we try to run the bases.
Again, if that's board's direction, we're obviously going to do what the board directs us to do. We just want you to be aware there could be a consequence to that decision.
Based on our visit the other day, you said you'd have to reconfigure. Well, you'd lose capacity by reconfiguring during the time you're fixing things, right? And because there's no space there unless we condemn property associated, adjoining it to try to expand it. I don't see where it's feasible. And like you said, the operational panels of Crooked Creek, they explained to us last Thursday that they're having to have the mechanics of those panels manufactured because you can't buy them.
it's an old plant.
Yeah,
It's an old plant.
So those are good points. The challenge we have is that if we wanted to expand it, the facility is so old, we would really be starting from scratch in a lot of cases. And the cost of doing that is not necessarily that much less expensive than if you just build a brand new wastewater treatment facility. And that's one of the reasons why Lower Crooked Creek was always the better long-term master plan, because the cost of it is not that much more, and you gain additional treatment capacity in the future, and you have a new plant that you can manage and operate.
And as Brian mentioned, we actually, Commissioner Rape, we actually studied this as part of the 2016 master plan. And so, you know, of the options they looked at for wastewater treatment options, this was a very expensive option, and that's why it was not the preferred solution in 2016, or frankly, the 2019 update, which is what we presented you.
I'm just trying to find capacity. You know where I stand on the greater issue.
I do.
So Chairman Hill,
Question.
I'm sorry.
Commissioner
Go
Rush.
ahead.
If you build a new plant, would you shut that plant down?
When you say new plant, if you build Lower Crooked Creek, is
And
that-
would you shut the Crooked Creek plant down?
eventually.
So.
But when I
so-
say eventually, you know, I actually have a slide that I'm going to show you sort of how we would sequence projects coming up. But eventually means we would shut down, decommission Crooked Creek about 18 years from now.
Is it in that bad of shape?
It's in that bad a shape that we're having to scrounge for parts because they don't manufacture them anymore.
So really, what Commissioner Rape's saying, Vice Chairman Rape's saying is that if we did do improvements there, it would probably, we're gonna have to either shut it down or do improvements one or the other anyways, right?
I'm not sure I follow.
Yeah.
Well,
Okay, if we're gonna shut it down.
When
if
we
we're gonna-
did the expansion of 12 Mile Creek, we had to divert flow from 12 Mile Creek into the McAlpine treatment plant via that force main that goes through Marvin. To take that flow off so that plant could be expanded. Now, your question was if you expanded Crooked Creek, would you have to divert flow? I don't know where you would divert flow to during the expansion.
Let me say one more thing. Now, the parts you're talking about we're having to make, those are all electrical parts, right?
Well, some of it's mechanical, you know.
But very few. Most of it's electrical switchgear.
Well, I'd have to ask Andy about that.
That's the example they gave
Yeah.
us the other day.
Well, I'm not an electrical engineer, but I can't believe that we can't buy a new, pay somebody to circumvent that problem, get it where we've got good electrical controls in there.
That's part of it. The board approved an electrical
Yeah, so,
study for that facility probably about 8 or 10 months ago.
yeah, so the board actually, you all approved a multi-million-dollar rehabilitation of the electrical switchgear out at Crooked Creek.
So once that's enacted, the problem finding parts will go away.
I'm going to say possibly. But if I can ask you to hold all those, I regret now putting that last bullet in there. But if I can ask you to hold all those, I think I can answer a lot of your questions in the next several slides, if you'll just sort of give me the time to
Go ahead.
go through them.
Blame it on Brian.
Well, I would, but in this case, it's my fault, because I put it in there. So Grassy Branch, this is the treatment facility at you can see it, this is the package plant. It's 50,000 gallons, both sides, pretty much running at full capacity. This slide is sort of indicative of its everyday operating condition where it's full. Again, you can see that it's not a very large area. We've already had conversation about it. I don't know what else there is to say about it, other than to say that we are working with the state. And Mark is exactly right. We're going to be, after the lawyers review it, after our operating staff review it, we'll be bringing something to you for your consideration as a way to go forward on Grassy Branch.
For the board's education, that picture actually looks better than Grassy Branch does in person. And if you look real closely after we walk the top of it, all those tanks are full. It is running at capacity.
Yes, sir. Tallwood, it is a really nice package plant. It's the best we got. It's, again, you can see it's a defined area. It's a closed neighborhood. We're not adding any more connections to it. It runs well, the best we got. There's really nothing, no decision for you to make other than, you know, pat the operating staff on the back and say, good job, because this is running, it's running as well as it can, and we have no issues there. Old Sycamore, this is a 150,000 gallon treatment train. It's a package plant, it's old. We've already had to repair some of the, metal and a corrosive environment don't mix. And so, you know, these side panels are thin, and we've had to replace them several times. It's a golf course community, it's just old. And we're gonna have to do something with it eventually, and it's part of the master plan update, so we're just wait to see what the master plan says as the best way to go forward on Old Sycamore. So there's really no decisions for you to make at this point.
Old Sycamore and Tallwood, they were both plants that were built by a developer that we decided to take on.
I don't know that we decided to take on is the right phrasing for it. Maybe Andy or somebody has more knowledge on how they came into our possession, but yes, we are operating them, and I think they were developer-built.
Yes, Old Sycamore was developer-built and donated. I'm not sure, I think Tallwood was as well. I'm not sure about Tallwood, actually.
Well, there's discussions of more of these in areas of the county. I mean, should we make a policy on, I mean, can the state force us to take those things over?
Well, I think I can generally say the state can force us to do just about anything.
Right.
Our preferred solution, we would prefer not to take over package plants, if I can speak for Public Works.
Maybe you could come to us with a policy about that.
I don't know if Mark wants to
The
jump in
proposed
here.
interlocal agreements that we have out to the municipalities right now addresses package plants that would be brought online as a result of zoning decisions that they make.
Okay, thank you.
On the east side, you can see the service area. There's a big force main running through it. Wingate is in the middle of that, and they use our system to convey their flow. It's a contract capacity that we don't use the 80-90 rule. There are several sort of triggers for, you know, how they manage flow with Monroe. And we also know there's development and construction, and we are doing a separate east side sewer study, the results of which were not available for today. I'd hope they would be, but we just need some more time. So hopefully by the next update, we'll be able to give you something on what's happening on the east side.
So I'm sure Monroe has same restrictions that the state puts on us.
Yes, sir.
Are they, do you know if they are approaching their limits?
Well, they, as I point out here, their next planned plant expansion is in 2030. We did inquire if that was any, you know, if they were going to move it up at all, but they have no plans to build out their facility prior to 2030.
What if we invested in that? Or what if
Well, we do. So our capacity, so just as an example, let's say in 2030 they build out 4 MGD, 3 for them, 1 for us. We would pay for a quarter of that expansion.
What if we, like if we decided not to build Crooked Creek, the lower Crooked Creek, and we decided to work with Monroe, could that solve some of the issues that we have?
No, sir, because geographically it's in a very different part of the county. And again, I'll show you in a few slides sort of what I'm talking about.
That was actually the subject of the 2019 master plan review.
Yeah.
I believe Commissioner Akmus asked for that
Called it
sometime
the-
in 2019. I think it was early on in 2019, maybe it'd been that February, March meeting we had at Cane Creek. And the 2016 master plan had shown that the force mains coming out of, that would be required coming out of Crooked Creek and those basins, Poplin Road and I believe it was Lake Twitty basins, over to the Monroe plant would be as expensive as building gravity lines and going to the Lower Crooked Creek.
I think we called it the Monroe option when we presented it to
Yeah.
you at the retreat.
So it's been reviewed at least twice.
Yeah, and it was, I think, $30 or $40 million more expensive to do that.
And again, that's assuming that we would be pumping it from Indian Trail, Stallings area over. I'm just talking about expanding it for other opportunities in other places of the county.
So if we're using it for the east side where gravity would flow to it, absolutely. The key we're gonna run into with, I'm sorry about that, with the Monroe project is it gonna fit our timeline? So if we have a timeline that we wanna provide capacity on the east side sooner, then 2030 that's a long time out. And can we wait that long in order to actually have a plan, have a solution online? That's a board direction that we're gonna need from you.
Hung, this would be a topic that the board members could give the consultants that are working on the master plan feedback on when,
Yes, sir.
when they meet with them. Because, if the board is interested in buying into the Monroe plant, expanding that plant to serve a different area of the county, other than what's already been discussed in the past, then that would be the
We can look
appropriate
at it.
time to
Well,
add that
we've talked
information.
about putting water there to wing it, and well, if they can't treat it, what's the use of putting water in a place where it can't be treated? So, I mean, that would be a concern. And are they gonna start in 2030, or are they gonna finish in 2030?
And it started in 2030.
So it takes 3, 4 years, 5 years?
Two
So
to
2035.
design, two to construct.
I just had a question for Brian there. It says, can we wait until 2030 for additional capacity? If we can't wait, have we explored those options of what that would be?
We're exploring it right now. So in a couple of weeks, we'll have the east side sewer study done, and we'll be able to bring that before you and sort of tell you, here's what we think the demand for sewer on the east side will be, plus here are the options that we think that are available to us
Great.
for how to address it.
Thank you.
I want to just go through this real quick. 6 Mile, it's the furthest west. We send it to City of Charlotte. Again, the contract capacity, I know we mentioned this to you. So our flow to Charlotte, there's an industrial pretreatment requirement that's applied to it because all flows going to Charlotte get hit with this. And so our costs are just going up as we continue to send more flow to Charlotte. It's not something we can negotiate. It just is what it is, and we have to pay it. So our cost for having Charlotte treat our wastewater is increasing. I want to point this out. It's not a sewer basin in and of itself, but it is the Poplin Road area. It's up here. The pump station is rated at 1.5. We are currently not permitting any new connections at this time because we can't send any more flow into 12 Mile Basin or the 12 Mile Creek water reclamation facility beyond what we're doing now. We are building out the equalization tank, and that'll provide 800,000 gallons of additional capacity. And if you're wondering, how much is available, we probably have enough projects in the pipeline to consume most of it pretty much right away. Managing, the other thing that I will tell you, and this is something that I'm going to tell you that we are bringing back to you because of our discussion about system development fees at the end of the year where we needed you to approve that ordinance change. We told you what the state requirements were, that they changed it from building permit to time and plat. We had given a 5-year window for developers to install infrastructure and build out, and that we were going to give them a 3-year extension if they meet certain conditions. And that condition was a 50% build out, and then Commissioner Rushing asked, well, what about the second extension? What's the criteria for that? And at the time, we didn't have any. And we promised that we would bring back to you at this workshop some, what's the condition for the second 3-year extension. And what we were proposing is that if a builder shows good faith and the build-out reaches 75% of the target, that if they ask for it, that the builder developer would be granted the second 3-year extension. And that way, it's a objective criteria, and it takes our guesswork or how we feel about a developer or a project out of the equation and just says, well, you hit 75%, yes, you qualify for the second 3-year extension and we'll grant it. Or no, you didn't hit 75%, and so we are not going to grant that extension. So that's what we're I guess looking for feedback on. If you want to have it now, that's great. If you want us to bring it back as a formal thing, we can do that in April if we're saving decisions until then.
It was just 2 extensions they could get.
Yes, 5 plus 3 plus 3.
Okay.
And if I'm not mistaken, this second 3-year extension, as the ordinance is currently written, it's at our discretion.
Yes, sir. Do you want to make a decision today, or? Brian says wait, so I'll say, let's do that, and we'll just keep moving on. And
Brian was wise.
And, yeah, we can put it together as an agenda item. So in terms of capacity, this is pretty much my summary slide. Pompland Basin is at a capacity. We're not doing any new development there. Crooked Creek is nearing capacity, and we just decided on that. Grassy Branch is over capacity. East Side sewer capacity is limited and it's being studied. 12 Mile is nearing capacity. And, how do I solve all this? And how does, the engineering work to solve all of this? And so the solution really is a lower Crooked Creek wastewater treatment plant. And I know how you guys feel about it, but I'm gonna show you some slides on it just to get you thinking. Because not only does it solve sort of the issues, it solves a lot of issues, I guess is the best way to solve it. That's that whole multiple birds with one stone, or I can't remember what the analogy is, but anyway, it solves a lot of problems. So, but in terms of capital projects on the wastewater side, on the collection side, we have the Poplin Basin EQ tank. In terms of conveyance, we have several interceptor projects just to make flow work better. On the treatment side, so this is really the inverse of what we do on water, where there's a source, there's transmission, and then there's distribution. Here, we collect it, we convey it, and then we treat it. We're doing the East Side sewer study. I also have the lower Crooked Creek here, both in italics and an asterisk to say that these are not final decisions. We're not asking you for a decision at this point, but I want to share with you this. Part of the 2016 and part of the 2019 updated strategy, this is what 2050 we think will look like based on that master plan. Obviously, we're going to update this based on current information that's coming out of the comprehensive plan and whatever direction the board gives us for the new master plan. But what we presented to you was this, that flows would continue going to Charlotte. We would send flow to 12 Mile from these basins. And up top here, we would send flow to a new lower Crooked Creek wastewater treatment plant. And the east side would still get sent over to Monroe. And that was really the strategy. And again, a lot of this is based on just gravity and where things flow naturally, because you want to use gravity as much as possible. The lower Crooked Creek facility would be about, sized as an 8 MGD plant with a 4 MGD start. It would take flow from Crooked Creek, so you can see, it would take flow from Crooked Creek, the Poplin Basin, and Lake Twitty's 2 and 3, and send it to this plant. And so I know you guys are having all sorts of discussion about, growth and development. That is not for me to decide, but what I can tell you is wherever we site it, it is serving existing sewer customers. And I'm going to show you another slide or two. This may show it better. So this is roughly the area we would site the lower Crooked Creek plant. Gravity flows from Crooked Creek to Poplin through Grassy to this location. Lake Twitty 2 and 3 would be a pump over, and I think I got arrows to show that, but that's what would flow there. That's the service area for lower Crooked Creek. The manager asked a question, which was a good one. So what's the additional gravity-fed service area that you could provide here? And this is it. This little orange area is the additional service area that we could provide based on gravity flowing to our preferred site. Just some other information. 94% of this orange area is within the town limits of Unionville and Fairview. Only 6%, this little bit right here, and a little bit in the corner is unincorporated area. Most of it's in Fairview and Unionville. most of this green area is within the town limits. 81% is within the town limits, and 19% is within the unincorporated area. But
When you showed
this,
this to Unionville and Fairview, did they say they're ready to start improving high-density development?
well, the manager did show it to, we did share it with Unionville and Fairview, but
Were they nice? We got manners. We have manners in Unionville, Fairview.
It was a lot of information, they took it in, they appreciated us coming up there and sharing it with them, but it did give them a taste for, you know, the area that could be served, if that waste treatment facility went in there. But, it was a good conversation, they're very nice people in both places, and they appreciated us coming out.
yeah, and so this sort of, I want to refer back to the slide I started with in the defined service areas. The Board of County Commissioners sets the defined service area. You would set this defined service area for whatever the new Lower Crooked Creek wastewater treatment plant is. But by gravity and the pump overs from Lake Twitty, that's it. Anything else in this gray area would require, you know, pumps and a force main to send flow to this location.
And I guess that takes me back to my question about, if we're gonna be pumping it over anyways, why not pump it to Monroe and help them build a plant?
Because this is a small pump over. You're talking about taking all this flow, sending it down even farther down on the map. And again, we studied it, and to do all that, it's a more expensive option than building out our own facility. And honestly, if you're giving me a choice, Hung, which one would you prefer? I would much prefer to operate our own facility than be in a contract with Monroe or anyone else. We do, you know, our folks, Andy and his folks do a great job, and I told Mr. Helms and Mr. Rape that on the tour. Our folks do a great job managing these facilities, and we can do it better than just about anybody, in my opinion.
Before I forget it, Brian, will you have your staff contact the municipalities that this 95% we just approved will affect, so they get a call from you instead of reading it in the newspaper?
Yes, sir, I'll be happy to do that.
One of the last things I want to show you, and I think I got 2 slides after this, is how would all this work? And so I'm going to show you this. How would we sequence this? Today, 2021, up to 2040. And this is, and I will say, this is a hypothetical. Right now, this is not hypothetical. We are doing this right now, and this is storage. We're putting in a EQ tank at Poplar Road. If you did decide, let's say you decided today, right now, to build a Lower Crooked Creek wastewater treatment plant, what does that mean? It would require about 5 years to go through the permitting process with the state. All the necessary studies and everything else, starting with land acquisition, studies, and all the permitting process. It would take 2 years to design, 2 years to construct. Could we work with developers or constructors and designers and engineers to shorten that if we needed to? Maybe, a little bit, but for now, we think it would be a 9-year process. So if you decided today that you wanted a treatment plant, it would be 2029 before it would be operational, 10 years. So if you did that, what we would do, it says Poplin Road Pump Station decommissioning, is we would send a flow from Poplin to Lower Crooked Creek by gravity, because that's one of the areas that it flows to. Crooked Creek, we'd start working at Crooked Creek in 2028, 29 to start figuring out a way to send flow by gravity to Lower Crooked Creek. At the same time, we'd be working on any kind of interceptors or, basically the sewer system in that area. The last thing we would do is we'd start thinking about how we would decommission Grassy Branch, because Lower Crooked Creek would have to be online first, and then we could commission Grassy Branch as a package plant and send that flow, because that flow would easily go to Lower Crooked Creek. And then we would say, and then if you wanted,
So I have a comment before you. When you showed me that 94%, and I lived here 67 years, I agree with Commissioner Rushing. If 94% is in Unionville and Fairview, I don't think that, I don't think they will down zone to create high-density zone.
I want to clarify, that was the manager asking what additional area could be served by gravity. That is currently not a service area that the board has adopted. That was merely just for you to understand an additional area that could be served by gravity. The areas in green are those service areas that have been adopted through the master plan and by the board that can be served. So obviously, if the board chose not to add that as a service area, then we wouldn't service that.
So the only areas on this map that are currently not serviced are Lake Twitty 2 and 3. We don't have any infrastructure in those two basins. And of course, the one that's in the yellow or gold is just identified as a potential gravity service area that would flow into that Lower Crooked Creek plant. I thought it was important to at least identify that. Anything outside those boundaries would have to be pumped into that facility. But for instance, on the Crooked Creek Basin, the Poplar Road Basin, any development that in the future that occurs there would all flow down to the Lower Crooked Creek plant. It's pretty obvious, even by this map, you can see where the dark greens and light greens are in the Crooked Creek and the Poplar Road, indicating where there are municipal limits, and what's the really light green is the unincorporated areas. Not a whole lot of unincorporated, but it's kind of scattered around. The majority of all of this, all of these service areas are within municipal boundaries.
Commissioner Rushing?
And remember that pump stations can be approved to go all around there, so just because that doesn't feed by gravity, I mean, you could go down 218 with a pump station, and developments could be popping up all around there too, so, and that would be the concern from that area, that you'd have a New Salem area.
Yeah,
Who would not be interested in that growth either.
Yeah, I think that's, you talk about ways to limit growth. I know unfettered growth out in the unserved areas of the county right now is a concern. But if this board chose to limit or not allow those pump stations and force mains outside of this gravity-fed area, then that would pretty much take care of that.
But we couldn't bind the hand of future boards.
Right, that's correct.
Question, the 800,000 gallon in a pop EQ tank,
Yes, sir.
was that taken into consideration when you look at your volumes in 12 Mile Creek?
I believe it was.
Okay.
Yeah, so the last thing I'll tell you is, just on this, sort of here at the end, is if all this ever got done, we would eventually take Crooked Creek offline and send that flow to the Lower Crooked Creek plant, and that would be in 2037. So, again, this is a rough timeline, but we would, as of today, the earliest we would ever decommission Crooked Creek is 2037, because we just need it. We just need to operate it. So it would solve, Lower Crooked Creek would solve a lot of our problems. It would solve the capacity problems in the Poplin Basin. It would solve the Grassy Branch problem. It would solve the Crooked Creek problem. To me, that's why, and it would do it more economically than any other solution that has been studied to date. It is, to me, a better solution than anything that we got right now. This is, just in case you're wondering, why does it take 5 years to get a permit? Here's why. We start with property identification. We've already done that. We know where we would purchase the land. We have a willing buyer. We don't have board authorization to purchase it, but we have a willing buyer. And then we'd have to do the studies to get the speculative limits, and then run through all this process with the state before we get the NPDES permit, which is the permit that we would need. And then that ultimately takes us to getting an authorization to construct the facility to do that. in the CIP, there is actually a $1.8 million budget that you have already approved for land acquisition and necessary studies. We have about 50, 60 acres that we would need, and we need that land before we do anything else, and then, there's stuff. Other just things that I want to tell you about, that stream modeling is complicated and it takes time, and it costs money. And the second to last bullet, originally we thought that there would be an opportunity to coordinate what we were doing with the Grassy Branch SOC and save ourselves some money by, but Grassy Branch is moving so fast in terms of what the state is asking us to do. The time windows for implementing a Grassy Branch solution, it's not 9 years. The state's gonna want something faster. So there really isn't, I thought there'd be a way to save money, but there's not. We're gonna have to do Grassy Branch. And again, like I said here, it solves those Popland sub-basin capacity issues. Just showing you some numbers. Here's what we got right now. Here's some areas where we got trouble. And looking at what Lower Crooked Creek would do for us, it gives us additional treatment capacity is really the bottom line. Nothing my screen keeps going black every now and again, and I don't know why. So 4 MGD a day to start gives us the opportunity to take Popland Basin offline, which is why it's 0. Grassy Branch is 0, so it solves a lot of problems for us. Just quickly, renewal and replacement. It is basically maintaining what we got. And just so you know what we have, it's almost 1,200 miles of water lines, 9 storage tanks, 6 booster stations, 1 water treatment plant jointly owned. I did not list Yadkin because, it's not real yet. We're in the construction phase. 70 miles of force mains, 720 miles of sewer lines, 55 lift stations, 5 treatment plants, 2 big ones, 3 package plants. This does not, I didn't list here all the fire hydrants, all the valves, everything else that we have to do and maintain and watch over, but there is a lot. And we have a lot of projects, most of our projects are actually in the renewal and replacement bucket just to maintain what we got, from, new meters to control systems to replacing galvanized and undersized water lines, electrical, operations expansion. And so I'm going to apologize for something I didn't do a year ago. There's this facilities and other bucket tied to buildings, big office space basically. And in my zest to show you all the water strategy, wastewater strategy, I just never showed it to you last year. And so I'm trying to correct that by showing you that, we got some staff-related stuff. We've gone from, 50 employees to 150 over time. So we're looking at operations center, 12, administrative space, lab space, storage space for equipment. There's just things that need to be done as Public Works continues to grow. Tools to help us to meet all this demand. We're doing a master plan. You'll be involved. We'll get you involved, and it's on the schedule, and we'll have something for you shortly on that. Like I said, the East Side Sewer Study is being done. We think we'll have something for you, by February at the latest. We're making enhancements because we know we need it. Permit tracking tool enhancements, so we can track what we permit and what we approve better and more precisely than what we do now. And honestly, we do a good job now, but because it's such a critical issue for us, we got to try to do even better. And lastly, we're installing automated meter infrastructure so that we can get more precise data, daily water use, so that we can manage this more closely and that we can understand it better. So that's it. That's everything I wanted to share with you today in terms of what we are doing as a Public Works, in terms of our capital infrastructure and what we need. In February, we're going to talk to you about our finances, the financial feasibility study that's necessary and required to borrow money to do the Yadkin project, give you some sense of rates and how rates work. We just called it a Rates 101, and then take you through the particulars of a rate study that we did for Union County, talk through our rate structure, because here's one of the important decisions we're going to need. We are in the second year of a two-year rate system that you guys approved last year. We're going to need a new set of rates for the next 2 years, 3 years, however many years you want to give us. And, we settled on 3 just for the purposes of this example. But we're going to need to ask you to adopt some new rates for Public Works going forward. And then in April, we'll ask you to make all those decisions. And these are some of the key decisions that you're going to have to make. Financial feasibility study, future rates, second, SDF expansion, and then, longer terms, how do we address these capacity constraints? And that's all I got. So it was a lot of time, so thank you for your time and for your attention.
I'd like to ask you a question, please. I'd like for you to include how we're going to deal with bulk water,
Bulk water.
because, and I've got a question for you, too. The new metering facility we have for bulk water, the little arms that come out that have the built-in meter. If we put one just specific for a developer, do they have to pay for it, or do we pay for it?
They pay for it. They typically rent the water meters.
I'll ask that the one on Potter Road has no capabilities of getting off-road. It's loading a truck in the middle of the road.
Are they still doing that?
There's been no trucks off the road
Okay.
to use that, and I noticed the new metering facility is there. I would expect there was a way to get off the road, I mean, because it's, you top a hill and then there's a huge water truck sitting in the middle of the road. It's not safe for our community.
As we were aware that it occurred at least a few times. It was our understanding that that has been corrected, but we will certainly.
No place to get off the road.
Okay, we will address that, yes.
Okay. But I would like to talk at how we come up with a plan on how we deal with that, because there's too much water theft
Yes, sir.
in the county.
We can do that.
Any
Before we
questions?
close out, Commissioner Rape, you had brought up the topic of Crooked Creek permit, expanding that permit or seeking that. So there wasn't a motion and there wasn't anything else going along that. I don't want to close this meeting out with an expectation that staff is taking that forward to seek an expansion of that treatment capacity at Crooked Creek. So I'll give that back to you and let you.
Well, my question is, how much time would it take for them to either act or turn down a formal request?
Well, to get a permit, it takes 5 years. I honestly don't know how long it would take to ask for an expanded permit, but I would surmise it'd probably take years. We can look into it.
Well, what really bothers me, the last time we asked was 2011. That was almost 10 years ago. Man, the world changes every 6 months. I mean,
I would say the world changes, but I don't know that the stream has changed that much. And I think that's going to be the deciding factor is, can you discharge more in that stream and it function the way the state is willing to accept it?
okay. Well, Mark, I appreciate you bringing that up. Let's leave here today with it unanswered, and let's.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure that, what the expectations were when we leave this room
Right.
for that particular topic. Okay.
I or somebody needs to talk to the other 4 commissioners to find out where they're at on it, because.
But we'll, at the February meeting and then again in the April meeting, there'll be
Yeah.
plenty of time to bring that back up, if y'all have different ideas or a different direction.
And I'll say something, and this is sort of trying to patch things up, Stoney. Talking about it and making a motion's 2 different things. So a motion's not being made today, but, I want to see where all y'all stand on it. And if there's not if I don't have any support, then I accept the will of the board,
Well, I'd like for you to communicate with the board through the manager and tell us if that facility, the way it stands today, can it pump out more volume? Or do you have to expand that facility?
Well, I can answer that now. It
Okay.
could not handle more volume. We would have to expand that facility.
Okay.
That's, the reason, the reason the EQ tank was put there was to handle that wet weather surge, because the plant is operating at its capacity.
Well, I would urge my peers that haven't taken the tour that they provided the other day to do that. It will enlighten you. Wear your boots if you're gonna go on the catwalk or grassy creek.
Well,
You need your hip waders.
and I'll invite any of you anytime.
It was
We'd be happy to take
time
you
well
out.
spent.
Take you out anytime, anywhere.
And the one surprise that I had was no smell whatsoever, none. So that, I commend the operators for the good job they're doing.
Got nothing else?
Could we take a quick look at page 53? I just have one question on that. The initial, well, two questions, I'm sorry. The initial permitted capacity for Lower Crooked Creek would be what, 8.2?
It'd be about it, well, we think, we would go for an 8 MGD permit, start at 4.
Okay.
But you build for 4.
Build for 4, so that's what I was trying to show here.
Okay. I may not have a follow-up question then. I'm good.
Okay.
Brian, do you have any other comments before we close out?
The only comments, I think, number one, I appreciate Young and his staff for all the work that they did on this and all the work that they were preparing for February and April. Just again, we've got some heavy lifts for the board coming up in April, because we really do need to get direction. Please don't hesitate to give us a call if you have other questions, so we can address those as quickly as possible.
One more thing, and I asked Brian today and he's gonna research it, but I thought it would be very interesting to know, of all the wastewater we're processing, how much comes from Waxhaw, how much comes from Indian Trail and Stallings. I mean, when we expand wastewater, everybody assumes it's because we have zoned a bunch of property, rezoned. But I think the lion's share of our wastewater comes from these towns. Do you see what I'm saying? In other words, to maybe educate them to the fact that, of course, they're paying for treatment, but we got to build plants to treat it.
Well, I would close out by saying, what you're seeing on screen is the leadership for Public Works, and they're highly trained and experienced group of professionals, and we are lucky to have them.
Thank you, sir. Anything else, Mr. Manager?
I second that, Young. Appreciate all the hard work that y'all did putting this information together. Board, I appreciate y'all providing direction on the capacity limits with the permits. That'd be very helpful to staff going forward. And if you have any questions, follow-up questions that you didn't get to today, or you think about it later on, please don't hesitate to reach out to us and ask. And we'll look forward to the February meeting.
I do want to say one little funny thing. I'm going to give you a compliment. The manager congratulated you. I said, Hung told me probably 6 times, if I didn't want to make the hard decisions, I shouldn't have run for commissioner. He said, well, good for him.
Then, if there's nothing else, I motion to adjourn. Special meeting.
Okay, I'm closing out, everybody, so thank you for being online.